Yeah, I love to. I used to sing when I was a boy soprano, singing classical music and stuff. So I know I would have carried on singing. I didn't particularly have ambitions to do it professionally, But I enjoyed acting very much. It was cool. And I kept doing that a bit, as much as school would allow.
So then you just evolved into a musician singer?
It was, I told the story, but forgive me repeating myself, but I met Gordon Waller at school, and we both discovered we both sang and played the guitar, so we tried doing it together, just out of curiosity, and see how it sounded. Because we learned some of the same songs, and I like singing harmony, so it made sense. We tried it, sounded good, and we kept at it. So we drifted into it that way, and eventually we went from playing gigs for fun to playing gigs for money or free food or whatever, and turned into a career. And then of course it became a real career when we got our record contract, when we were talent scouted in a very traditional way. We were just playing a gig and someone came up to us after the gig and asked us to come on audition, and we did.
I wonder if you'd have waited 5 years, if you'd have gotten picked up by Apple.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, if I'd been head of A&R at Apple as I was, I would have signed me for sure.
So Micky, as an actor, tell us about your audition for the Monkees, because what was the part that you called for? What were they asking?
What was the what? I'll come back when I have a question to answer.
What was your audition like, and how did you hear about it?
Well, let me go back just a bit before that, because it didn't just come out of the blue. It wasn't like an overnight thing. I'd been an actor as a child. I also had started playing guitar. My father got me into playing Spanish guitar, classical guitar, things like Segovia and Villalobos and stuff. As a child, I mean, very simple stuff, and I was okay. I'd studied for a number of years, 2 or 3 years. And then I started going to high school. My mother and father were both singers, so it was around the house all the time. My mother taught me how to sing harmony, and my sister, and so it was always around the house being played. Early 50s music, and late 40s and things like, Chattanooga Choo Choo and Be My Love, or whatever. And so it was always around. And I started playing guitar, and I would take my little guitar to my junior high school or high school parties. Became the local little mascot of the parties. And I'd play a little Malagueña, and the girls would say, "Do you know any Kingston Trio?" And I'm like, "I'll be right back." I went home and I bought a Kingston Trio album and started doing "Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley." So I was a little party animal. Well, that morphed into more folk music, and then some of the folk music in the early 60s coming out of New York, like Woody Guthrie and like other acts like that, and then Peter, Paul and Mary and the Wee Five and that kind of folk music. And a friend of mine started a little duo playing guitars and singing some of the folk music. And like I said, I was in college doing architectural drafting, but I was singing around town on open mic nights. And I went out with a couple of cover bands. This is all pre-Monkees. I went out with a couple of cover bands, one called Micky and the Goodnighters, and one called, what was it? It'll come back. And just doing cover songs. And I was doing things like House of the Rising Sun by Eric Burden. I can't wait to tell them. And, Money by Barrett Strong, and Walking the Dog, and a song called Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. These were like my little party pieces in my cover band. So along comes this audition, and if you read the original audition in the Hollywood Reporter, the one everybody talks about, it says wanted 4 actors. It doesn't say 4 musicians. It says wanted 4 actors to come and play in a show about this band. I hadn't seen the audition. I had a private audition with the producers because I'd already had a TV show as a kid. So one gets a private audition. One has had one's own television show.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, certainly. So I went in, And I had the first interview, reading lines from the script, which was quite typical for a pilot. By the way, there were 3 other pilots that year of music shows for young people that I was up for, that I went for the initial auditions. One was called, the only one I remember the name of was called The Happeners. It was about a Peter, Paul, and Mary kind of group. And it did go to pilot, but did not get sold. There was another one about a Beach Boy kind of surfing band. I don't remember much about it. It didn't go to pilot. And another one about a big family, New Christian Minstrels, The Mighty Wind, a group traveling around. It didn't sell. It didn't go to pilot. But the Monkees, obviously, was destined to, I guess. The audition process was extensive. It was much, much more than I'd ever experienced in a television series, which would usually be an audition, maybe a callback, maybe a screen test, maybe not. And then you either get cast or not. But this seemed to go on for just ever. There was a singing audition, singing and playing. I played Johnny B. Good. That was my audition piece. There was improv. There was an interview, extensive sort of on-camera interview with Bob Rafelson. And then there was scene study where it was down to like the last 8. And I don't remember anybody at all from that, except Davey. I do recall doing some scene stuff with Davey, because we had a lot in common, being child stars, and he'd been on Broadway, and I'd done TV. He had done TV in England. So I do remember David, but I don't remember Mike and Peter at all in those screen tests. And like I say, you had to be able to play and sing. So the producers clearly had in mind that hopefully, if it all happened, we would go on the road someday, or they wouldn't have bothered to hire singers and musicians. And so we, obviously, short story then, I got cast, but it was just to be in the pilot of the show. Because you never knew if a pilot was going to sell. Most didn't, ever.
Micky, when the 4 of you got together for the first time and knew you had all been cast, how did you build your relationship? When did you actually feel like you were clicking at least as an ensemble, even before you were playing together? When did the 4 of you kind of coalesce together?
Oh, months after what I'm talking about. I literally met all 3 of the other guys one morning at a wardrobe fitting. That's the first thing that happens when you're going to shoot something, is because that takes the longest to prepare. So it was a wardrobe fitting, and it was, oh, hi, Mike, Micky, yeah, what's your name, Peter? Oh, hi, Peter, Micky, I'm Davey, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. But we had all that in the audition process. But musically, I had been in the business, the peripheral, as a singer on Monday nights at open mic night at a famous club called the Red Velvet.
So you were still doing that?
This is this was just before and during the audition. Producers came down and saw me at the Red Velvet on open mic night doing something, Johnny B. Good or House of the Rising Sun. And I looked, it was the era of the Jay Sebring haircut thing, the Righteous Brothers. It was all that slick back, pumped up hair with shark skin suit and a little thin tie. And they came down and actually saw me do that. I had recorded one song. Producers, even before this, like a year before, had approached me and said, they'd seen me singing around town, and said, you want to make a record? And I said, sure, how do you do that? I had no clue about the recording industry. And they said, oh, we'll get a studio, and then you write a couple of songs, which I did. And some of you may be familiar with it. Don't Do It is one of them, and then Huff Puff was the other side. And I went down to the little studio, and there was 4 musicians there, and I'm like, where do I stand? Over here, my microphone, and oh, great. Years later, I became very good friends with someone who came up to me, and he said, famous musician, he said, I was at your very first recording session before the Monkees. Don't do it or something like that. And I was like, wow, really, you were there? He says, I was the guitar player. It was Glenn Campbell. And the musicians I later discovered were the Wrecking Crew.
Wrecking Crew, that's a terrific special.
Yeah, it was Earl Palmer on drums, I believe Carol Kay on bass, Glenn on guitar. I'm not sure who the piano player was. Could have been, Leon Russell. For all I know, I don't remember. So I was not totally unfamiliar with music. And like I say, you had to be able to sing and play to get through the audition process.
The lyrics are in the first song, of course. The Monkees are here to sing and play. Scott, can you follow up on his relationship with the Beatles?
Sure. So the Monkees hits the airwaves, and in some ways, the Beatles have to be looking at you and saying, "Hey, they're copying us," and yet you're performing great. You're funny like they are. You're having hits. You're outselling them in some ways. When do you first meet them? What's their reaction to you? What's your feeling about meeting them? And how do you end up becoming friends?
Well, it would have been 60 then. That would have been 66, I guess, or 60. I'm not really good at dates and stuff. I get very,
before or after? Sorry,
I get very confused. I was over on a press junket. We were huge fans. I was huge fans of the Beatles, and listened to everything. And one of the things that knocked me out, and I think had a lot to do with besides the incredible music, was the attitude, the personalities, and the fact that they were kind of grown up. Only a year older than we were, but American kids at that age were still in diapers, relatively speaking. But in England and in Europe, I guess in general, that generation had lived through the end of World War II. Liverpool was still a bomb zone, in parts. And they had to grow up real fast. And in England, you do tend to grow up a little faster. By 18, you can drink, you can smoke, you can go out and get a job. You have to go out and get a job. So you grow up, at least back then, you grew up a lot faster. So all of a sudden, these four guys that were just our age were like sophisticated, and they were very funny, and they had these wry sense of humor. How do you find the United States? Turn left at Greenland. We're like, what? how do they? And they're smoking, and they're just have these cosmopolitan, laid-back European. And back then, Europe was like Mars to kids in the United States, especially on the West Coast. I remember Lonnie Donegan, but that was about it. I mean, there was not much, or sukiyaki from Japan. Where's Japan? Because you get very isolated, especially in a country like the United States. So all of a sudden, to me, I remember the Beatles were like aliens with a different language, bird, fab, gear, whatever, scribbling all the time. What is a bird? Fab, get one. So it was slang, it was an attitude, it was a sense of humor, banter, repartee, which we had no clue. You told a joke, usually a dirty one. That was humor and comedy for the most part. So of course, we were all very impressed. So I go over for this press junket, and this is about the time, if I'm not mistaken, when we had our big kerfuffle with the record producers and Donnie Kirshner and all that, about trying to at least have something to say about what was going on in the music.
Wanted more control of the songwriting and the production and
everything. The album cover, the liner notes. We had absolutely no input at all. Not what was going to be written and sung, who was going to sing it, nothing. And Mike, especially being, got very, very frustrated. I tell the story about Different Drum. Everybody's heard that one. And he almost quit. He says he was like, I got into this sing and play, And they're, well, yeah, don't worry about it. Just, shut up and sit down, kind of, thing. Peter talks about going to one of the early sessions with his bass guitar, and they said, what are you doing here? So as musicians, singer, songwriters, I can imagine that especially Mike was terribly, terribly frustrated. Anyway, we had our palace riddle. We had our little coup. And I was supposed to go to New York to sing a song that I believe was Sugar Sugar. That was going to be the next Micky single. And Mike and we all talked and we agreed, no, we can't go back in the studio till we get this sorted out. So I jumped on a plane and went to London, and it was starting to set up for a tour over there. And the publicist must have got together and said, hey, Paul McCartney wants you to come over to his house. And I nearly fell on the floor. And I got my autograph book. I put it in my pocket. Thank God I never took it out. That was it. And I'm trying to be so cool,